Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to tonight's main event featuring brother versus brother. In the red corner, from Indianapolis, Indiana, an ER doctor, a Christian, a Republican, Dr. David Blank. And in the blue corner, hailing from San Francisco, California, a computer scientist, an atheist, a Democrat, Dr. Doug Blank. Now it's time for the Blanks to rumble!
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Blank versus Blank. Today, we're going to talk about the latest Texas abortion bill right now. Hello, brother.
Hey, brother. How are you?
Good. How are you doing?
We're good. We're easing into fall. The weather's starting to change. Are all your fires out in Texas or in California? We're talking about Texas.
We are going to talk about Texas, and we don't have any local fires here in San Francisco. But so there was this recent bill passed in Texas. This was around September 1st, 2021. What do you know about that, and what do you think about it?
Yeah, so I think most people have heard of it, and most people have kind of gotten their ideas from the media reporting. In a nutshell, the bill says that you cannot, so the bill has several parts. You have to get an ultrasound before you can get an abortion in Texas. That's actually a preceding bill that was already in place. Then you have to wait 24 hours before you can get your abortion. Now, this bill says that it is illegal to perform an abortion if you find fetal heart activity on the ultrasound. So that's part one. Part two then is what I think a lot of people consider the novel part of it, is instead of making that a crime or making that illegal from the state's perspective, the enforcement of the bill is the general public. So anyone can sue a provider who breaks the law, whether they have anything to do with anybody in the case at all. So you don't even have to live in Texas to bring a suit against somebody who breaks that law.
Well, I don't know if you could live anywhere. It seems like it's really, it's a law about Texas for Texans. So, but let's not get into the details about who can sue whom just yet. So, okay, so we've got these two main parts. There's the biological heartbeat business, and then we have the enforcement part of the law. So
yeah, I think that's it.
Let's talk about the biological components first. So yeah, there's this part that says if there's any heartbeat activity. Do you know how many abortions that were performed in Texas prior to this law that would now be prevented?
Yeah, kind of working backwards around. 83% of all abortions in Texas were 8 weeks or less. So you're looking at less than 20% look like they're actually going to fall outside of this range.
Well, I guess it depends on the measurement and if there were heartbeat activity. So you went by weeks. So that's different from what the law actually says, which is, I guess, why there is some discrepancy about whether it's 6 weeks or 8 weeks, or because it's dependent on whether or not you can detect heartbeat activity.
Right.
So I've actually seen at least one report, and I can share this with you in just a second. I just saw it, and it looks like they're saying that 80% of the abortions performed in Texas would actually have been illegal if the law had been already in place.
Yeah, and see, I find that a crazy statistic.
Yeah.
based with the numbers that I was just talking about, where like 45,000 out of 54,000 occurred before 8 weeks of pregnancy. So they're saying that uh, somewhere in the range of like 70% of all pregnancies are between like 6 and 8 weeks. And those are all going to be illegal. So that, at least from the technical side of things, I think that's a ridiculous made up number.
Well, I mean, do you have any data to base that on? I mean, what we're
Yeah,
both...
just that 83% of all abortions happen before 8 weeks. And so when you look at ultrasound, I do ultrasounds in the ER. And so there's been a lot of talk in the news about transvaginal ultrasounds, which puts a probe in the vagina right up against the uterus, really high resolution, and you can detect a lot of things that you can't with an abdominal probe, where you put it just over your belly.
Yeah, we've talked about those abortion probes before. I think we blogged about it maybe 6 or 7 years ago. I think in one state, those were required in order to get an abortion.
That was Virginia. And so I did a little looking up the other night. So Virginia's law didn't clarify one way or the other. And so when that bill was going to go into effect, there was the potential that it on paper looked like that might require a transvaginal ultrasound, and they changed that before it actually was signed into law. So I could not find any law in any state that requires a transvaginal ultrasound. So that's been the way a lot of reporting has gone on in the media, but I could not find that to be a fact at all. That's a requirement for this bill or any other bill. So with that being said, a transvaginal ultrasound could pick up fetal heart activity, which in itself is a very vague term. You know, does that mean heartbeat? Does that just mean there's some blood flowing in a manner that's being pumped? Does there actually have to be a heart fully developed? It's a vague term, I think, on purpose. But at 6 weeks, you might be able to detect that with transvaginal. You cannot detect that at 6 weeks with an abdominal ultrasound. And you might, if you're really, really good, be able to pick up some kind of fetal heart activity with an abdominal ultrasound at 7 weeks, but that is unusual. And so you start moving into 8, 9, 10 weeks before that becomes something that is more likely.
Okay, so you threw in a few things there that we should probably just clarify. So
Sure.
the law says that you can't have any heartbeat activity.
Right.
That's the law. And it could be the case at 6 weeks, if you use the right kind of measurement device, you could detect heartbeat activity for many, many, many of the pregnancies. Not heartbeat, but heartbeat activity.
Potentially. I don't
Potentially.
know that you can say many.
All right,
but you might be able to pick it up in some.
Okay, so and maybe even 80%. Perhaps. You don't know. I don't know. You said a minute ago it was ridiculous. And I'm just saying it could be 50%, it could be 80%, it could be 25%. We don't know, but it definitely is a strong possibility that you're going to be able to find some heartbeat activity at 6 weeks.
I mean,
some people.
We can look it up and maybe put up a graph. I'm sure there are studies that show what percentage of fetal heart activity can be obtained at 6 weeks with a transvaginal ultrasound.
Okay.
It is a knowable thing.
Perhaps, but there are also other kinds of measurement devices too. And the law only says that if you have some kind of heartbeat activity that can be detected through some means, then...
On ultrasound. It says ultrasound.
But it doesn't specify what kind of ultrasound, correct?
Right.
Okay. So some kind of ultrasonic machine, maybe it hasn't even been invented yet. Maybe it was invented a week ago. We don't know. But if that can detect heartbeat activity, then you cannot get a legal abortion in Texas.
That's true, but now you're throwing in a whole bunch of
Well,
things that may not even exist.
no, but that's the way laws work, right? You
Sure.
can't just say that.
No, I'll let that go.
Well, I just want to be precise. And if we're talking about vaguely worded laws, then it is useful just to sort of explore where that vagueness is and where discrepancies might creep in. Right?
Go ahead.
No, I think that's the end of the biological part, right? It's just that if there's some ultrasonic machine that can detect a heartbeat activity, then you can't get an abortion legally in Texas.
That's what the law says.
Okay. So, and as we just sort of clarified, there are holes in that law. And, you know, to me,
Well, I don't know what you mean when you say holes in the law.
well, vaguely worded laws have holes in them.
It just says if you find any cardiac activity, you on an ultrasound, you cannot get an abortion.
Yes. So it doesn't specify the measurement device. It doesn't measure exactly what that activity is. To me, I do not want to live in a country that has vague laws like that. Laws should be specific, so you know whether you're breaking them or not.
I don't know how you can get more specific. Cardiac activity, yes or no?
Well, what does that mean? Like you say, is there blood flowing through some region that when the embryo develops, that will be a heart? I think you could probably get an expert to say, yes, that would be heart activity.
Yes, I think that part of it is pretty clear. It doesn't say you have to have a fully developed heart. It says cardiac activity. So if you have blood pumping through an area that is not fully developed but will be the heart, that's still cardiac activity. It's pumping. It's a regular rhythmic pumping.
Well, I didn't say pumping. You did. I said flowing. So if you have some proto blood-like material flowing through the region that will eventually develop into the heart, we're saying that would qualify under this law.
I don't think it's just under the law. I think that's the reality. Something has to be moving the blood. It doesn't just go around in a circle by itself.
Well, that is something that you could argue in court, right? The law says flowing.
It just says cardiac activity.
Okay, so that could be a lot of things. It doesn't have to do with blood. It doesn't have to do with pumping. It doesn't even have to do with a region. That is so vague. And you could imagine with some creativity, you could fulfill that in perhaps a few ways.
No, that's
okay.
Yeah, just from the medical side, that's pretty specific. You may think that is vague, but like until you actually get some type of vascular system in place, there's no flow. You can't have like 6 cells.
You're talking about flow again. That's not cardiac activity. I mean, cardiac activity could be an electrical system in place. It could be membranes. It could be some kind of.
But you're talking about things that you can pick up with an ultrasound. And that's different. You're not measuring electrical activity. You're using Dopplers to measure flow. That's how ultrasounds work. It's sound waves that bounce off of things, and you measure movement. You can see static structures, but when you're talking about cardiac activity, you're measuring movement, and you're using Doppler to measure flow.
Okay, so it's also true, though, depending on what kind of ultrasonic device you use, that you either will or you won't be able to detect this activity.
Yeah, and it's based on resolution. It's based on the size of the developing baby.
Okay.
You know, you
So,
can't pick up things. So some things aren't in existence up until a certain point.
right. And some
And then
things you can't measure.
and even when they are, depending on your ultrasound, you may or may not be able to see things.
Sure. So the point of it is that one doctor using a specific kind of ultrasound might be able to detect this activity at 5 weeks. Another
No.
doctor,
No, that you
all right,
cannot do that at
6
5 weeks.
6 weeks. But okay,
Yeah. So technically speaking, 6 weeks would be the earliest possible.
okay, all right. So you're saying no human in the history of humans has ever had a heartbeat activity at 5 weeks. That's what you're claiming, and you know this.
With an ultrasound, even a transvaginal ultrasound, I don't think that that would be possible to pick up
Okay, you
any
don't
type of
think that it
cardiac
would be.
activity.
All right, so let's go with 6 weeks. It doesn't matter. So you're saying that one doctor with a particular.
Well, it does matter.
Okay.
Like I said, if 83% of all abortions in Texas are 8 weeks or sooner, then the timing becomes a big point of contention.
It certainly does, and any variation in the woman's body or the developing embryo's body could really give some, distribution on that measurement. So
Right.
it could be 5.5 weeks, it could be 6.5 weeks, it could be 6 weeks in a day, it could be 6 weeks minus a day. I mean, there's going to be variability in human embryo development, surely.
Some,
Okay, that's all I need from you
yeah,
is
but
some.
it's not like
Okay.
5 weeks, 4 weeks.
Okay. I
There
didn't
are
say 4 weeks,
there are
but
time frames that
let's go with
it
6
works.
weeks, please. The point is that one doctor measuring with one device at 6 weeks is going to get one reading, and another doctor measuring with another device at 8 weeks could get a different reading.
Right.
Those two readings may not be the same. Or they might agree. They both might not detect a heartbeat, and both of them might detect a heartbeat, and one
So
might and one might not. And that's
right.
completely expected. We know that. That's the way that these devices work. That's the way that human variability works.
Go ahead.
So that's the point. So when we're talking about this law, and you're talking about the difference between 2 or 3 weeks, that's pretty huge timing differences in the development of a human embryo.
Sure, certainly. Yeah.
Okay, so that's one problem with the law. The second part is, as many people have stated, many women don't know that they're pregnant until perhaps in that range.
Well, so that's another point of debate. So back to the ultrasounds before we move quite off that. So if you're an abortion provider and the law says you can't provide an abortion until if you develop or see any fetal heart activity, and the law doesn't require you to do a transvaginal ultrasound, you're not going to do a transvaginal ultrasound. You do an abdominal ultrasound. And if you use a low quality machine, you're not going to pick up any fetal heart activity. So if you're a provider and the patient wants to get an abortion, you can choose your equipment to fall outside of the restrictions of this law relatively easily.
Yeah, you could have a really crappy one, and you might not even detect a heartbeat until, let's say, 3 months.
That's not realistic.
I'm just saying, that's what you just said. If you have a really bad ultrasound,
I
you
didn't
might
say
not.
3 months. I said that
Okay,
you're
but
going to.
at some point in the future.
Yeah. So this is all just technical stuff with ultrasounds. If you do an abdominal ultrasound and you're an average technician, you will reliably be able to pick up heartbeats or cardiac activity at 8 to 10 weeks. You're not going to find it at 6 weeks. You're likely not going to find it at 7 weeks. You might not even find it at 8 weeks.
Okay, that's my point. Yeah.
Yeah. So when you're doing an abdominal ultrasound, like I say, the media keeps pushing this 6-week ban. But I think that technically speaking, that's just not a realistic number.
Yeah. Okay. Because,
And
but it does.
therefore, my opinion is that this law is not going to affect 83% of the people who got abortions in Texas this past year.
All right. So I think we now understand the biology, and I think it's fairly clear, in my mind at least, that laws shouldn't really be based on things like this. The biology, the timing, the measurement device, all of that stuff really shouldn't even be involved in whether or not you're deciding to get an abortion or not, right?
So you disagree with Roe v. Wade? You think Roe v. Wade was a totally flawed decision and should have been thrown out? Should be thrown out.
Well, I don't know. We're not talking about Roe v. Wade today, but
you are. You just brought it up.
I didn't bring it up.
Roe v. Wade was all about trimesters and dates and when you can get an abortion and when you can restrict an abortion, and it was all based on trimesters and dates.
Yeah. So what I am saying is, yes, I agree with you that we should not be having things like that in our laws. It really should be up to the woman. It's her body. You shouldn't have any kind of measurement that you could force on her to try to get a decision or a measurement in order to try to prove that she's breaking a law or not. That seems just
well, that's
crazy.
your opinion that the baby isn't a baby. I mean, we already did a vlog on abortion.
I didn't say anything about that. I said it's a woman's right. Whatever it is, you want to call it a little child, a baby, a human. You could call it a student or a human. You could call it a voter, a user, whatever you want your euphemism to be. That's not the point. The point is it's inside a woman's body, and that is her body, period.
Yeah. Like I said, we talked about abortion before, and it's a unique set of DNA it's not the mom's DNA. It's unique to the mom. And although it's in her body, it is a unique individual.
Let's focus on this point, though. So we've already talked about the biological part, and we see how messy it is, both physically and legally, that you have to have these measurements, you have to have the device, you have to have the requirement in order to have the measurement, so you can say whether or not the woman is breaking the law, or the doctor, or whoever is.
You keep trying to make it more complicated than it is. It says if there's fetal heart activity on an ultrasound, you can't get an abortion.
Yeah, but you have to measure that. You have to know what the boundaries are. So yeah, I'm not making it that complicated. You have to measure it, and you have to then make a decision.
Not messy or anything. Use an ultrasound and you take a look. If it's there, you can't get an abortion. It's too late. If it's not there, you can.
You have to have a law then that forces the woman to have an ultrasound.
That's already on the books.
Yeah, in Texas. They just did that one too.
It's actually like half the states in the country right now.
Well, probably because of Roe v. Wade. So, all right. So we've talked about the biological part of it. And my opinion is that the government shouldn't be in that business of, measuring biological items on your body in order to tell whether or not you're breaking the law. And your opinion is?
As far as ultrasounds?
Just that part of the law, the biological component of the Texas law.
They've drawn that line that they determine if you have heart activity. I think what they're thinking is that is a measure of life. If you have a beating heart, that considers you to be alive, and that's where they're going to draw the line.
Okay, and you think that's fine?
I think that's reasonable. I mean, they're not banning abortions. They're putting a limit on when you can get an abortion, and they have drawn a line that the majority of people agree with. If you have a heartbeat, you can be considered alive.
Well, I think 70% of Americans are in favor of abortion long until the term that a woman could actually reasonably decide whether or not to end that life or not.
Yeah, you might want to check your polling.
Okay.
Most people are in favor of restrictions. Most people
I
are not
didn't
in.
say that they weren't in favor of restrictions. I'm just saying that probably most people are in favor of the woman having enough time to make that choice. She has to know that she's pregnant. She then has to have the opportunity to decide.
Well, I mean, I've seen multiple people in the ER who come in who don't know they're pregnant and they're in labor. So you can't draw that line. There are people.
I could draw that line, sure. I mean, just because
You can have an abortion. So you're saying that you can have an abortion as you're delivering the baby if you didn't know you were pregnant.
If I had my ability to draw the line somewhere, I was like, as long as that embryo is inside the woman's body, it's her body, she chooses. All right, so
all right.
Yeah, all right.
That's not a view that most people in America hold.
I'm not saying that I represent most people in America. No, I represent me.
You're actually an outlier.
Okay, that's fine. I'm completely at ease with that. So now let's talk about the enforcement part of this. Now, some people would claim the biological part is already unconstitutional because it goes against some items in Roe v. Wade. So there might be constitutional arguments there just because Roe v. Wade is the law of the land currently. But then there's this other component about the enforcement of the law. And this seems to be even more problematic than the biological component of the law.
Yeah, so I tend to agree with you that I think that you get a slippery slope when the enforcement is just any kind of civil lawsuit for money that anybody can bring about. Because then all of a sudden you could essentially put somebody out of business, even if they're not guilty of anything, because they just have to defend themselves against a bunch of civil lawsuits, which is hugely expensive. So you run the risk of bankrupting people who have done nothing wrong just to fight off lawsuits.
Yeah, and that doesn't sound good. That doesn't sound like the America that we want to live in.
No. And so it brings up this whole issue of standing. Who has the ability to sue? And generally our laws, at least my understanding, is in order to sue somebody, you should have to have suffered some kind of damage to sue.
That makes sense.
Yeah. And this law does not specifically clarify that as to some kind of damage. It doesn't say that if you're the father, you can sue, if the mother got an illegal abortion because you now have lost your child. That would be a damage. But this law does not clarify or specify that.
So why do you think they did that? Why did they put that in the law?
Well, it turns out it's not unprecedented. Lubbock, Texas, has actually had exactly this ordinance on the books for over a year, but I couldn't find any evidence that anybody had sued anybody. But
yeah, I don't think it's the fact that they want people to sue each other. I think it's the fact that they want that to be the threat. Like you said, if somebody sues you, you could go out of business. That's the power of the ability to sue somebody.
But it turns out that that's how almost all environmental laws are set up by the federal government, is anybody can sue a company that they feel are violating environmental laws, and those companies have to defend that. And those people don't have to have any proven damage at all. So it's environmental laws by the federal government turn out to be set up exactly like this. And
I don't know about exactly. I mean, if you are damaging the environment, that is doing damage. So whether or not you are the one that is being damaged might be a point of argument in a court of law. But that if you are damaging the environment, that seems like something that citizens downriver would be really interested in being the ones that were able to sue the company.
But they don't have to prove any damages. They can just say, here's the law, they're violating the law, and I am suing and I get money for bringing up the suit.
But I guess the point is that there are people being hurt. It just might not be the ones in the lawsuit.
Yeah. So like I said, that there are questions. I think this is a dangerous path to go in.
Yeah,
I think
so
we
but
both
back-
can agree that this seems to me to be the wrong way to go about it.
Yeah, but back to the question that I had for you was, why do you think they put that in this law?
Oh, I think you and I can probably both agree wholeheartedly that this is a way to, so they've had numerous laws in numerous states that have all been challenged and they're all being held up in the courts. So this is a novel way of getting around that because the state is not the enforcer. And I think that was, I think they've even, the people who put the law into place said that they did that because that kind of skirts around all the issues that these other laws have faced. So
They put this in the law in order to make it so you couldn't sue the state of Texas.
right, because they're not the enforcers.
So
I've heard people say it's clever, and I suppose that is the right word to use. It's a way to get around the way that the law is set up to try and reach the ends that you're trying to get to.
I'm not sure I would use the word clever. To me, like you said, it's opening up a can of worms, and anything that opens up a can of worms doesn't seem clever. That seems problematic. That seems wrong-headed. It seems like what you want is exactly laws so that there is a way that people that are being unfairly harmed by that could have some recourse.
Yeah. So there's the whole issue of standing that's going to have to be decided. And I can't imagine that it depends on who brings the suit, if they can determine that they have standing or not. I don't know that there's going to be a lot of lawsuits, but I can envision on this particular topic that there are people lining up just waiting for the opportunity to sue.
Yeah. Who do you think those people are? You think they're right to life people, or do you think they're right to abortion, pro-choice?
Well, it's certainly not going to be people who are pro-choice. They're not going to be in favor of any law that restricts abortions.
No, I mean in favor of a lawsuit.
Yeah, again, the defendants in this case are all going to be abortion providers. So anybody who is in favor of abortion is not going to be in favor of any kind of bill, no matter how it's written.
No, I don't mean the bill. I mean a lawsuit against the bill. The bill's already passed. It's a law. So my question is, who do you think would be in favor of bringing a lawsuit against the bill to show that it would be unconstitutional? I think it would be the pro-choice people, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I thought you were talking about who's going to bring a lawsuit now that the law is in effect.
Yeah, no, that's what I mean. Who's going to?
You're talking about who's going to challenge the law.
Well,
I was talking about, yeah.
The only way you can do that is the only way you can do that, though. I think. Well, maybe you can do it without an actual somebody getting an abortion, somebody trying to get their $10,000 prize for turning that person in. I think we didn't talk about that, but that's another component of the law, I guess, is that you get rewarded for $10,000 if this results in a successful suit.
Yeah, but see, that's exactly the point of this law. Is I don't know if the Justice Department can bring a suit against Texas because, ironically, there's no damage done, and so they don't have standing because it's a civil case. So I think it may have to wait until somebody actually uses the law and brings a suit against an abortion provider, and then somebody can step in and
Yeah.
challenge the law.
Well, that's what I was wondering about. It, not even talking about the justice. I guess you're right. The Justice Department under Merrick Garland, ironically, I mean, he actually should be one of the people deciding whether or not this is constitutional. But he's going to be the one that's bringing the lawsuit from the Justice Department.
Yeah, and I think he's already planning on doing it, but
Yeah. He announced
I'm
it.
I'm
They've
not sure
already
what
filed it. I think the paperwork is available.
yeah, I'm not sure that they're actually going to hear it because, again, they may say he has no standing. So it'll be kind of interesting to see now how it works its way through the courts. It's
I
clearly
don't
going to work
think-
its way. Yeah, it's going to work its way through the courts for sure.
Yeah, I mean, if the Justice Department can't weigh in on the law because it doesn't have standing, that basically means that the Justice Department is just, there are some laws that are out of reach of the Justice Department. And I don't think that's ever been the case.
Oh, I'm sure there are. I would have to look, but they don't challenge every suit, but most things, they can challenge something that makes it a crime because they are the enforcers of crime. They're the Justice Department.
Yeah, well, that's what I mean. If a law is unconstitutional, the
That goes through the
Constitution,
courts. Yeah, that'll go through the courts.
but you have to have a case in order to get it into the courts. So I think the Justice Department does have standing if you're arguing that something is unconstitutional.
Yeah, but back to our kind of the original discussion on this law, that's why they wrote the law like they did, so that the Justice Department can't challenge it.
Well, that's their hope. So, all right. So I think we covered that pretty well. So just to sort of wrap up, what's your overall assessment of the Texas law? What's your feeling? Will it go
so I
forward?
think-
What's your prediction?
Yeah, so a lot of it, I think, is going to hinge on another case that is going to the Supreme Court this next session, and I think that is it's some other southern state who might be Mississippi, who put a 15-week restriction on abortions. So they actually drew a line in the sand by dates, and that's being challenged, and that's going to go to the Supreme Court. I think if the Supreme Court rules that is allowable, then I think that this Texas law probably is also going to stand. Now, the thing about Texas law, they didn't draw a line and say dates. They put a place on development that is different. And so that is kind of a unique measurement that they're using.
According to you, that cuts the 15 weeks in half.
It's certainly it's going to drop that down. So like I say, if they shoot down and say, no, you can't restrict an abortion at 15 weeks, then whoever brings a suit against the Texas law is probably going to be able to win that because it's going to be below 15 weeks.
Yeah.
So I think that this case kind of hinges on that. But I don't know how it's going to go. Like I said, there are other laws on the books already for environmentalists and stuff that they use all the time that kind of follows the same narrative, that have not really bothered anybody because it's not a really hot button issue. So if they shoot down the Texas law because it's a civil suit that people can just bring without having any clear damages, that may unhinge a whole bunch of environmental laws.
Well, do more than that. I mean, if the liberals got a hold of that idea, you can imagine there would be all kinds of things that would be illegal. And if you got turned in by your neighbor, you could be prosecuted, and those liberals would end up getting $10,000 rewards. I can imagine if there were a law about insurrectionists, um, and you could make that be a civil case, and your neighbor turns you in because you went to Washington D.C. on January 6th. Or if you have a certain kind of gun that you were supposed to turn in and you didn't. There's all kinds of ugliness that you would have neighbors turning on each other, which is not what we want. We want
Right.
we have
No,
law
that is
enforcement.
that's the Soviet Union, where
Yeah.
your neighbors are spying on you to turn you in.
Or
That's
Nazi Germany.
or
That is,
1984.
yeah.
So yeah, we both concur that I think that's the part of this bill that really concerns me greatly, and it concerns you as well. You still have to break the law for your neighbor to turn you in, but
Well,
I don't. Yeah, I think
laws
trying
laws
to.
can be made. We can make a law that says X, and then but we don't have to enforce it. We can let you enforce it.
Well, that's done all the time, though. I mean, in New York, you can't go into a restaurant unless you're vaccinated. Who enforces that? There's no police officer there. It's the restaurant owner who has to check your card and make sure you're vaccinated before they'll let you in. So there are all sorts of ordinances and regulations already in place where the government has put private citizens in charge of enforcing their law. In that case, though, the restaurant owner loses his license. He doesn't get a bonus for turning you out.
Right. And I can't think of any law like
I think
that.
that's, but I
that I'm
think that
against.
I think that is wrongheaded as well. That New York was putting private business owners in the role of enforcing some
Oh,
vaccine mandate.
no, it's not just New York, and it's not just about vaccines. It's about serving alcohol probably in every state in the union. The police don't come to your table and check to see if you're over 21. It's
Right,
the restaurant that checks. And if you
right.
are serving alcohol to a minor, you're going to get your alcohol license revoked and probably have to pay a steep fine. I think most people are okay with that. That I can't think of any law like that that is enforced. I mean, the enforcement is just a refusal of service. So if you don't have your driver's license, you're not going to get served, a beer. That is not that big of a hardship, and I don't think of anybody really object. Well, apparently you just objected to that whole idea.
Yeah, for the same reasons we're talking about this bill. In this bill, the person gets like a reward or a bounty, you might say, for turning somebody in for breaking the law. But yeah, I think that you got to be really, really careful for all the reasons we mentioned.
Yeah, I don't
We
think you have to be
we
that
don't want this.
careful. It's pretty simple. You just don't reward citizens for, turning in other citizens. That seems pretty straightforward.
Yeah, I think that it's well, like we said, all of a sudden you run down a path where we become the Soviet Union, and that's not what we want.
No, I think that's pretty clear distinction in my mind. And this Texas law, ironically, from one of the places in the United States that prides itself on civil liberties, is the one that has gone around the bend and made this a law.
Yeah. So I guess one last point. I want to still try to keep this video short, but
We're past that point.
yeah, I think that the workability of this law, though, people are all up in arms, and they're it's all over the news. It's going to be the end of Roe v. Wade. I don't know how this is even gonna work. because in order to bring a suit against somebody, you have to know what the woman's ultrasound showed.
Yes.
And I don't know how anybody other than the patient can know that. Just she and the doctor.
It seems crazy. There's just so many points of craziness. I mean, the idea that it doesn't even cover rape or incest, that's crazy.
Well, it's just the whole, like I say, the whole law hinges on an ultrasound result. But in order for anybody to bring a suit that somebody has actually, so first somebody would have to have an ultrasound that shows cardiac activity. Then they would have to perform the abortion anyway. And then somebody bringing suit would have to know what the ultrasound shows. And I don't know how that can happen
Yeah.
with HIPAA laws and such. So the idea that, you know, just anybody anywhere is going to be able to bring suit, I think is just kind of overwrought
Well, as we mentioned,
misinformation. Because, like I said, the patient or the doctor would have to voluntarily tell that information to somebody and say, I got an abortion anyway.
well, as we mentioned, it's not the lawsuit, it's the threat of the lawsuit. That's the power of the law, is that you don't need to actually be able to do this. You just need to have the threat of it in place.
Well, the power of the law is it's the law. It's signed into law. You cannot perform an abortion if you see fetal cardiac activity.
Well, no, I'm not talking about that part. I'm talking about the second part, the enforcement, is that if you suspect, I guess, that somebody has done this, then you can sue them.
Yeah,
and
but if the enforcement were, you have to pay a $50,000 fine, or you go to jail, or you lose your medical license, those are all other threats.
So I think the bill's certainly going to be challenged, as all abortion laws are always challenged. I'm a little bit surprised that the Supreme Court went ahead and let it continue pending a challenge. They apparently felt there were quite a few novel aspects of this law that need to kind of work their way through the courts. So it's hard to make any predictions at this point. I think based on that initial ruling, there are at least 5 justices that seem to think that there is some merit to the way the bill is set up. So we will have to see. Like I said, if the other bill that goes through the Supreme Court this year with the 15-week limit gets shot down, then I think this bill likely will also be shot down for the same reasons.
Yeah, I'll have to agree with you on some parts of that. I do think there could be an abortion law that didn't have any kind of challenge, at least from the left, and that would be if they just made abortion completely legal, like the majority, the rest of the civilized world. But until that happens, we probably still have to continue to argue about heart activity and ultrasounds and craziness like that on the one part of the bill, and whether or not it actually is unconstitutional under our current craziness with Roe v. Wade. But the second part of the law, the implementation, is just full of bad news. And I hope that if that ever got anywhere near the Supreme Court, that they wouldn't let that go. Just the idea of citizens enforcing the laws over other citizens for rewards even is really a bad idea. And I think we both can agree that that is something that we probably don't want to see going forward. So with that, thanks, brother. And I'll talk to you soon.